I want to welcome everybody. Thank you for tuning in on live on Facebook or later on YouTube. Thank you, everybody in person. Our delay may cause us to be in a little bit of the heat, so I apologize for the sweatiness and the smell that may elude through here earlier. But thank you for coming out. Don't forget, there will be a link in the comments to tithe and to help Connect Church, and then we have our faithful little tithe bucket over here. Find somebody this week that maybe is missing. Find somebody this week that maybe you haven't seen in a while, and just remind them about Jesus and about our church. So kind of be on the lookout for that. I mentioned earlier with the group here, but I want to mention online that we're looking to start a Zoom prayer meeting, and we'd love for you to join us. And we also have our Wednesday night group at 6:30. We have some great discussions and great things over there, so be a part of that. But we're continuing our series on Hebrews, and in Hebrews, we're going to be in Hebrews 12, 1 and 2 today. This is, as you read through the Bible and as you kind of know and study the Bible, this is one of those passages, John 3:16, Philippians 4:13. One of these passages that's kind of stuck out and has been kind of familiarized, and people really know this. In Hebrews 12, 1 and 2 is one of those passages, and so it may be familiar with you. We'll kind of look at it and see and kind of study and dig into it today. And so if you are at Hebrews 12, 1 through 2, let's kind of dig into that. And it says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance a race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God. If you would, let's pray. Heavenly Father, you are a great and awesome God. We thank you for this day. We thank you for the truth in your word. We thank you for the fact that we can meet out here and meet together, and we just ask that you continue to lead, guide, and bless us. And we ask that as I preach, that these words aren't my words, but your words. We love you, and that's all these things in the precious and holy name of Jesus. Amen. So we start off with the familiar word here, therefore, and when we see that, what do we do?
That's what it's there for.
Yeah, we go and we look and we see what it's there for, right? So what the author of Hebrews is doing is he's tying in Hebrews 11. Remember last week we talked about this idea of Hebrews 11 is this kind of list of people of Hall of Faith, almost like the Hall of Fame, but the Hall of Faith where people have done these great things. And he kind of lists them. And so what he's doing is he's laying them down and he's talking to them and he's showing them as an example. So he says, therefore, so because we have all of these people, because we have all of these people that have gone before us, and he says that they're commended through their faith, and he kind of is tying that in. He says, since we are surrounded by so great cloud of witnesses. So we have this example. Now, when some people look at this, they're like, oh, see, people up there, and it's like a sporting event, and they're down there, and they're cheering us on, and there's a great big cloud of witnesses. I don't know if that's necessarily true, right? When we get to heaven, it's great, and it's wonderful, and Jesus is there. I don't know if there is this concern of what is going on down here, right? And I think what the author is trying to say here is that there is this past that we have, and he even mentioned that last week, right? That we're building off of that. And this cloud of witnesses then are these people that live, and then we can take comfort in knowing that they did this or they did that. And then he goes on to describe how they live. So this is more for us to look up and say, remember those people that did this, rather than them looking down like it's some spectacle or some sporting event cheering us on. Now, I may be up there cheering us on, but I think they got better things to do. I don't know about you, but I don't know if I want my Father who's in heaven looking down and cheering me on when he could be worshiping at the feet of Jesus. I think there's something grand, more grand and bigger up there to do. So we see this idea, though, that the author here is talking about this idea of this life. He's using this metaphor of walking in the life. And so, therefore, because you have all of these people, there is these great crowd of witnesses that we can emulate, that we can follow, that we've also built. And notice what he says. He says, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight. So that we need to emulate what they've done. They also laid off every weight, every sin that entangles, everything that kind of slows us down. So we need to emulate them. When Emma has classes, either Monday, Wednesday, Friday, or Tuesday, Thursday. So whenever I take her to class, I go and I walk. And I walk around North Collier Park, and I just kind of stroll. Now there is a difference, in case you're not aware of, there's a difference between walking and running, right? When I walk, I listen to kind of podcasts, or I listen to the Bible app. I can do other things. I can text back people that text me. I kind of walk, and I kind of walk at a brisk pace, but it's not running. So there's a difference between walking and running. When I see people running at the park in the morning, there's a different look on their face, right? When they run, there's two looks generally, right? There's the intense "I'm running" runner, right? That I've got to break a task. Then there's the "I can't believe I'm running" face that looks like they're in pain, right? So me, I'm kind of happy. I'm just walking along, right? And then you see the runners running, and it's a totally different thing. And so what he's talking about here is says, let us then lay off, right? Let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and then with endurance run the race, right? Let us run the race. And so we see we have these witnesses that have run this race. We have these witnesses that have also taken off all of the things that encumber us, these sins. And then he says, then we are to emulate them. So we really see two things here. We see this let us, right? And then we see this look to. And we've talked about this before. All throughout kind of Paul's writing in the Bible, there are these let us statements, right? Let us emulate, or let us do what they've done. And so there's two of them, right? So let us lay aside and let us run. And he really is talking about this idea of a metaphor of life, right? He's talking about this idea that life is like a race. And so in a race, there's a start and a finish. And in life, there is a start and a finish. And this idea then that as a race, he's kind of saying our faith is like this race. Now, whenever I think of race, I don't know about you guys, but I think of like a track meet, right? Track season is coming up in a little bit, and my kids did track. And in track, you either are throwing or running, or you have some event where you do something and you know you're going to do it, right? Let's say you run the 100, right? It's real simple. It's a straight line. You run as fast as you can and get to it at the end. There's a beginning and an end, and you are focused and you are running. Now, when I think of this, I think of life. When I hear race, I think of this. But life isn't really like that, right? I don't know about you, but my life hasn't exactly been a straight line. It hasn't been a smooth track surface. It hasn't been, with a quick start and a quick finish. It's more like, I guess steeplechase, maybe if you're thinking of track where they got to go around and they jump over things. But really, I don't know about you, but for me, my life's been more like a Tough Mudder, right? Ever heard of these races, or Spartan race, right? And if you don't know what they are, some insane person thought of this. And I would love to try one time. I'm not exactly in the best shape to try, but I'd like to try it. So they go and they climb these obstacles, and the Tough Mudder one is they climb through mud. And the Spartan races, they have them on ESPN, or watch them one day. They're insane. They climb these walls, they climb through things. So when I think of the journey of our Christian faith, when I think of our journey of our life, I should think more of that, right? They have one that was called a bubble run, and I thought that's more my style, right? They had little blow-up things you could climb up and down. They had like bubble stuff. And I'm like, all right. And I signed up for it. I was all excited to go. And then like 2 weeks before the event, they canceled. I was like, oh, man. But so maybe life is more of a Tough Mudder, a Spartan run, or if you're lucky, it's a bubble run, right? But the idea of life just being simple and straight is not how it is, at least not for me and for my life. So we have this life, he says, that we have this journey that God has put us on. We have this race that we're supposed to run. And part of this race that we're supposed to run is this idea that this course has been laid out. This course has been set out. I mentioned earlier that I walk in the mornings. And Beth and I will go on Saturday mornings when we drop them off or practice. And one time they had like this 5K set up. And they're like, you could see all the cones and everything. And they had signs. And I texted Beth. I said, oh, man, I really hope this isn't running. Because the last thing I want to be is that dude walking. And like all these people out here doing a 5K and running as hard as they can. And you got these cones. And I was just like, oh, please don't let it be running. Please don't let it be running. And then when I came up, the guy took down a sign. And I was like, yes, right? I can walk in peace, not in shame, right? And so here you go. You have this idea that this race, this life that we live, is ups and downs and turns, and it's a race where we kind of run and we move through and kind of go through. But he says, then let us lay aside, he says, since we are surrounded by so great cloud of witnesses, let us also lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run. So one of the things about track is you'll see that they have these kind of, they'll either wear warm-up suits or they'll wear like other shirts. You just don't walk around in your track outfit all day. You usually have something over it. And so when I hear this, I think of this, right? When you get ready to run your actual race, you get your gear on. You take off your warm-up, you take off your sweatpants, your shirt, or whatever it is, and you get your actual running uniform on. Maybe you have track shoes. They do this weird little walk where they don't want to put the spikes on the ground. It's kind of funny. I kind of laugh every time. But you have certain shoes that you run. So you just don't run out there in your Converse, but they have things that they wear. And so life is like that. As we run it, the author here says, look, you got to lay aside everything, right? You got to lay aside all the stuff that's going to slow you down, that's going to tangle you. You don't see when they get ready to run the race, they don't put on a backpack with weights on it, right? They don't put on, a dress suit, or they don't put on dress shoes or high heels, right? They don't put on things that are going to slow them down, but rather they take things off and make it as light and as aerodynamic and as easy as possible for them to run the race. And so as Christians, we need to keep this in mind, right? That we are to do two things, right? To let us lay aside all the things that kind of entangle us, the sins that are burdening us and bringing us down, that we need to purposely say, okay, what in my life is causing me to kind of divert? What in my life is causing me to kind of go away from the race or slow me down in the race? What are these sins? What are these things that take glory and honor and praise away from God? What are these things that I have to remove in order for me to run the race better? Now, we can go through the Bible and you go through the Ten Commandments and you can list them all down there and you can see, and I can't kind of tell you, I'm not going to text you later on, by the way, you need to take this off. This is kind of a personal thing that you have to understand and you have to know about your life, right? You have to understand that maybe this thing is struggling. Maybe I have a group of friends that are leading me in this direction, or maybe I have a habit that I do that is leading me in this direction. So what the author is saying, look, let us go ahead and lay those aside. Let's go ahead and put those away because those are hindering us from our goal, right? From the task that has been set. And then he says, let us then run the race. Now remember, there's a difference between running and walking, right? And there is even a difference between running correctly and running incorrectly. Friends, probably not the best show, but there's a scene in Friends where Phoebe runs, right? If you've seen the episode, you can look it up. And she kind of runs, and she runs wildly with her arms out. She flails her legs, right? You don't want to run like that when you're running in track, right? You want to be compact about it. You want to run in the right manner. And so as Christians, we need to not just kind of aimlessly walk through life. We don't need to just kind of bump from one thing to another. You don't need to just kind of, just mosey around, walk around, look around at things, but you live with a purpose, right? You live and you run with a purpose, that you run this race, this life, with a purpose, intentionally, right? Not just on a casual stroll in the mornings, but run as you're attending to get to the end and attending to get the best time. So lay aside all of the things that are struggling us, and then we run the race, and we run it properly. And so we'll see here that he's encouraging us to do two things, to lay aside and run. He's encouraging us that if we don't quite get it or quite understand it, that we have this great cloud of witnesses to look at and to see and to understand how they also laid aside and ran a race. And then we have that example then that we can go ahead and then proceed to kind of run this race. And so he gives us this example by letting us see that we lay aside and run, letting us see that we have this great cloud of witnesses that also did the same thing. And then he gives us a goal to kind of shoot for, right? If you run a race that just kind of runs all the time and doesn't end, right, then it's kind of pointless. It's kind of not really a race. There's no start and finish. But then he says here, he goes on, he says, that we run the race with endurance, meaning to kind of struggle, to persevere, to kind of keep going at it because it's going to be hard. And then he says, to run the race that is set before us, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the Father. So now when I have a goal in the mornings, there's two paths I can take, right? There's a long path and a short path. And it depends how I feel in the morning. Some mornings, I take a short path. I don't really feel like it. Some mornings, I take the long path. And so there is this idea that there is this race kind of set out before us. And as Christians, we lay aside everything, right? And we have this goal in mind. Now, whatever path I take, my car is kind of the end thing, the kind of thing that I'm looking to get back to, right? Because if I don't get back to my car, then I'm walking the rest of the day, and then that ain't good, right? And you got to have a car, you got to walk around, you got to do things. So I start with the end in mind and looking towards that and saying I'm going to get back to the car to get my day going and get the rest of the things done. As Christians, this end thing that we're keeping our eye on is Christ. And he says, let us then look to Jesus. Let us lay aside, let us run, but then let us look to Christ. Now we have these clouds of witnesses, right? And we see how they live, and we see how they've done things, and we see how they have an example. But ultimately, those pale in comparison, right? Christ as our ultimate example, we see the cloud is kind of inconsequential compared to Christ. Now, as great as David was, and as awesome as his life was, as up and down, as awesome as the example he is, or Moses, or Aaron, or Joseph, or anybody you want to pick from the Old Testament, or even New Testament, Paul, or Peter, any of these examples, they are nowhere near as great and awesome as Christ was, and as Christ is. And so Christ then is kind of our example. Christ is kind of our who we're looking for, right? So when you run a race, there is this object at the end that you kind of look to, the end, the goal line, right? The finish line. And so as you run, you just don't have your head down, you just don't have your head up around looking, but you're paying attention and you're looking towards the goal, right? You're looking towards the end, and that is Christ for us. So he says we look and we see that Christ is the end. So why is Christ then that ultimate goal? Why is Christ kind of that thing that we focus on? He really gives three reasons here. He says, first, we look to him because he is the founder and the perfecter of our faith, right? That he is this one that has kind of taken this faith, and that he's the one that founded it, he's the one that's started it, and not only that, but he's the one that finished it, and he's the one that perfected it. Now remember, we're talking, this book of the Bible was written to Jews converting to Christianity. And where before, when they were kind of under this kind of Jewish covenant and under this Jewish law, their one they kind of looked to was Moses, right? And Moses gave the commandments. He was kind of the example. And we see here that it's this idea then that Christ now is this example. So he's the one that started this. He's the one that perfected this. He's the one that's kind of laid the path, right? He's kind of the one that started this whole thing, and he's the one that's finished this whole thing. And we do this a lot in society. We understand that we kind of honor people, and we understand that because of what they've done, or maybe they're the first to do something, so we name something after them, right? Or we name the thing that they did after them, or we name, the path that they found. We name a road after them, and we honor people with this, and we understand this, that there are certain processes that have started from this person, and we name it after them. Or there's this road that they did where they founded this great thing, we name it after them. And so for Christ, as Christians, as we run this race, we understand and we know that the reason we focus on him is because he's the one that's laid the path before us. That he is the one that's founded it. He's the one that's kind of understood it. He's kind of the one that knows where it's going and understanding and seeing it. When I was younger, I liked to kind of go hiking and walking through the woods, and there will always be paths that you could follow, right? Where somebody's gone before, or people have gone before, and the trees are kind of out of the way, the bushes are out of the way. It's kind of the grass is laid down. You can see an easy path, right? You can see how you can go. Sometimes you go down a path and you're walking, and the path just stops, and you're like, okay, maybe I picked the wrong path. You go back and you're trying to find the right path. So So what our faith is that Jesus is the one that's kind of laid the path. He's kind of the one that's shown us the way. He's given us this ultimate example. Why the cloud of witnesses is great. Jesus is the one that we should ultimately be looking at. So we look at him because he's first the founder and the perfecter of our faith. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I make mistakes. Kind of. Well, not a lot. Maybe often is a better word. Sometimes, I don't know. But I make mistakes. And we have these days where we make mistakes. And it helps, I don't know about you, but it helps me to kind of look at people that are already doing things that have already done it, right? There's an old saying, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel, right? So let's say you're doing something, you want to start a restaurant, just for example. And somebody out there that goes and starts restaurants has got to cut this pattern. And you go and you talk to them and say, hey, what did you do? What mistakes did you do? What things did you do that worked? How did this work? And we don't want to kind of repeat the process. And we don't have to repeat the process when it comes to our faith. We know what Jesus did. We see how he lived. We went through this whole series looking at all of the parables of Jesus and what he said and what he taught. And we looked at Jesus as kind of our example. And so we don't have to reinvent this kind of idea of how we should live as Christians. Not only do we have a great cloud of witnesses to have as an example, but we also have Christ, who was the founder and the perfecter of our faith. So we look at another reason. He says, because of example. He says we look and we see Jesus as his ultimate goal because of what he has done. And it says, for the joy that was before him, he endured the cross. Now, I don't know about you, but when I run, which is seldom, right, as you can tell, right? I got knee pain. I don't know where it came from. I have a knee pain. Even when I was younger and in shape, like I played sports, and it was always short kind of burst things. And I remember we went, our football team, we did like a fundraiser 5K. And keep in mind, I was young and I was active and I was in shape. And even then, I didn't like running long distance, right? And some of the guys, like the track team was out there and they're flying. And us football guys were like, man, this is for the birds, right? I mean, this is long. It was hot. I mean, and so when I think of what Christ did and how he lived his life and how ultimately at the end the goal for him was the cross, the last thing I think of is joy, right? So this is what it says. It says, but for joy, right? He says, who for the joy that was set before him, he endured the cross, despising the shame. But for him, see, he saw this and he took joy and he understood and he knew that what would happen would be great and wonderful from it. So you may not like walking, you may not like running, but being in shape or being healthy, or you may not like this diet plan, or you may not even like, your job or where you work. But at the end, you understand, okay, there are benefits to this, right? I get a paycheck, and I can provide for my family. If I walk, I get in health, better shape, and I feel better. Maybe I eat the right things, I feel better. Or you are in school. Maybe school is a pain, but you graduate high school, and then you go on to get a job. There's something at the end there, right? And as Christians, we should have this joy about us, right? Now, this isn't happiness. There's a difference between joy and happiness. Happiness is you wake up in the morning and it's like the clouds are gone, the sun is shining, the birds are tweeting around, and you're happy, right? Or you're happy throughout the day, but then you kind of get around 12:30, you miss lunch. It's around 1:30, 2 o'clock, and you start to get hangry, right? Happiness can go and come. Joy is something different. Joy is something that we as Christians should be joyful in our run. Remember earlier I talked about that there are two kinds of runners, right? The happy runner, where they're out there and you're looking at me like, what is this person's deal, right? They're like smiling and they're running. And then there's the unhappy runner. When I worked and I had a job, they would come to me and they're like, why are you happy all the time? Why are you like, everybody else was miserable at this job, but why are you happy? And I was like, well, this is joy, right? I may not be happy. I'm standing on my feet all day. My feet are hurting. It sucks. I understand that, right? But I have this joy knowing that I'm providing for my family. I'm a witness to the community, right? I understand these things. And so we see this as an example. Because of how Jesus lived, there was this joy that was set before him, knowing that the cross was terrible and it was going to be a hard thing. We even see that in the Garden of Gethsemane, right? Where Jesus is praying, and he prays God, if there's any way that this cup should pass from me, right? He's human, he understands, and he knows what happens at the cross. And so he's praying, and he says, look, if there's any other way, and there isn't a way, so then he says, okay, fine, and he endures the pain that comes from it. The crucifixion, right, is actually the term, the excruciating pain, right, or to be in excruciating pain, it actually comes from the word cross, right? So it's even worse than just regular pain. It's this kind of thing that you understand, and he knew that he was going into it, but because of the benefits, because of the things that would come from it, the salvation that would come from it for all people to be covered by his blood, to be saved and sanctified through his action, he took joy in that, knowing that this would be there. So we see his example, how he is the author and the perfecter of our faith. We also see that with joy, we should have this joy in the things that we do. Look, I'm not saying you are happy all the time, and you're one of these people that are just kind of always smiling. Or we understand there's ups and downs, but not happiness, but joy, looking towards the benefits of these things. And then we see kind of his example. Now we see kind of the results of it. It says that he's seated at the right hand of the Father. So we know what Jesus did, that he was our author and perfecter of our faith, that he laid this groundwork for us to follow, that he's his example, that he did it with joy and knowing what would happen. And then afterwards, there is this idea that he is now sitting at the right hand of the Father, the power seat of God, that he is there and he is in control, and he is leading, and he is over everything. And then one day when he returns, he's going to set up everything new. So there is this result then of our faith, right? And so we should have joy knowing that we're running this race. Knowing that at the end of this race, no matter how hard it is, whether it's a walk, whether it's a jog, whether it's a Spartan race, a Tough Mudder, a bubble run, right? We know at the end of it, there is this prize and this reward. As Christians, we have this security. We are sealed by the Holy Spirit. We are covered by the blood of Christ. We know that when we fall and we mess up, there is this grace and this mercy. So we should have this joy knowing that at the end, no matter what happens, that we will be in heaven with Christ, and we will be with Christ forever, and we will be saved eternally, knowing that our souls will be saved. And so there is this joy then, as Christ saw this joy, there is this kind of knowing at the end, right, that there is this kind of prize, that there is this a goal for us, there is this place for us. Now, at the end of a race, if you do good at the race, right, you usually get some kind of medal. You usually get some kind of reward. You get some kind of maybe a gold or a bronze medal. There's some kind of reward at the end. And this is this idea then that at the end of our race, we all receive this prize. Those that are of Christ, those that are born again, those that are covered by the blood of Christ, we receive this prize, which is heaven, which is Christ, and salvation and eternity in heaven with him. And so we see this idea then that what the author of Hebrews is talking about is, as Christians, how do we kind of live this life? How, as Christians, do we view life? How, as Christians, do we view this walk of faith, this journey that we have? How do we kind of live our life in that way? And I always try to leave you with this idea of a cross connection, right? How do I take this and apply this to our life? And so this week, I'd kind of like us to kind of look at our lives. Maybe we even take a step back today and kind of see how we've been running this race, right? Have we been running this race kind of aimlessly, bumping from one thing to another, kind of just going from here to there? Or do we see it as a race, right? Do we see it as something that we should be aggressive about, something that we should be kind of pushing and leaning into? Do we see it as a great opportunity for us along the way to do things for Christ and to honor him and to bring him glory, to bring people even along in our journey? Because that's what it is. It's a journey. It's a beginning and an end. It's a path that we should be running. It's a path with endurance, knowing that it's going to take a while. It's not a sprint, but it's kind of a longer race. And so as Christians, we want to bring people along in our journey, bring people along in our race. We want to witness to people. We want to talk to people. We want to be discipling people. We want to be out there sharing and singing of the praise of God and the glory of God. And so I hope this week, maybe we take a step back and maybe we say, okay, what kind of race am I running, right? What kind of manner am I running the race? and kind of look at it and see, is my Christian walk, is the way that I live in my faith a walk or a run, right? Is it a walk where I just kind of am like Kevin in the morning, just kind of aimlessly walking around, look, you see a squirrel over there. One morning there was a big old, I don't know what the big giant squirrels they have up there. I took my phone out and I texted to Beth, right? I'm like, look at these gopher squirrels. Like, look at this big giant squirrel. And they just walked along the path and totally ignored me, right? Is that you in your faith, and you're walking along your faith, and hey, there's this nice shiny object, and you go over here for a little while, or you go over, or are you purposely running, saying, okay, I want to grow in Christ this week. I'm going to read the verses that Kevin gave us. I want to kind of help, and I want to help the church. I can do this. I have this skill, or I have this gift. I know this person that needs encouragement. I'm going to encourage them. Or I know this family that's struggling. I'm going to go and I'm going to help them out. And the ups and downs of faith and bring people along. So I want to encourage you this week. Are you a walker or are you a runner? Right? Are you walking the path, or are you running with endurance the path that Christ has set out for us? If you would, let's go to the Lord in prayer. Heavenly Father, you are a great and awesome God. We thank you for the truth that is found in your word. I thank you for the examples that you have given us, the great cloud of witnesses, all those in the past faith that have lived a life that we can emulate, that we can kind of say, this person did this situation, and we should emulate that. But we ultimately thank you for Christ and what he did, and how he's the author and perfecter of our faith, and how we look to him and we look to what the cross did as our ultimate path to where we should go. So may we be people that are looking to the cross through grace and forgiveness and mercy and the blood that was shed for us, that we then look and we try to emulate and be as much like Christ as we can. So this week I hope and I pray that we can be cross runners, that we can be people that are running to the cross, people that are bringing people along with us and living in a manner where we can one day say, oh, this great cloud of witnesses includes you, me, and includes all of us. We love you, and we ask all these things in the precious